You're listening to Intentionally Inspirational, the podcast for entrepreneurs and those who just want more out of life. Now for your host and author of the upcoming book, The Backwards Route to Forward Progress, Jason Wright.
What's happening, everybody? Hey, it's Jason Wright, your host, and this is episode number 53, Talented Learning with John Lay. Before we jump into the conversation with John and I, share a little pain/funny story with you guys. So I use a MacBook Air to do my podcasting and most of the work for my business because that is the superior of the two machines that we have, the other one being a PC. If I've ruffled your feathers on that, not my problem. Just kidding. Anyway, last week I got a notification in the iTunes store that there was a new operating system upgrade available. And some of you may know where this is going, but I upgraded from whatever I had before, never paid attention, to Sierra, and upon doing so, my computer began to run very slowly and the fans are stuck on high. So I took it into the Apple store twice, very helpful. They did everything they could do. It's still not really any better. At least I can record a podcast now with the computer very far away because it's loud, but I've built a little sound booth out of cardboard and foam acoustic panels, which seems to be working pretty well, so you won't hear that. And the next step is they want to ship the computer out for, I think, 5 days. So hope I don't have to go that route because I really can't afford the downtime, but it is what it is. My point of telling you all this is exactly the stuff we talk about all the time. You know, even I deal with stuff that I don't foresee, plan, or want to deal with, but you don't have a choice. That's how life works. So you have to find ways to overcome your circumstances and keep pushing. Otherwise, you end up with a thumb in your mouth and a bottle for dinner and no forward progress. And we know that's not how I like to roll, and that's not how I want you guys to roll. So anyway, talking about overcoming that itty-bitty struggle, let's get on to the good part of the show. I had a conversation with John Lay. I'll introduce him on the actual interview in here in just a second. But he's a great guy. He's got a good story. And he touches on some points that I know are going to speak to some of you. So let's check out the conversation that John and I had. Hello, everybody. Today I've got a great guest with me. I've got John Lay, who is the CEO, co-founder, and lead analyst for Talented Learning. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Just so I understand, and you may fill in the blanks or I may miss, but so what your company does, you're kind of a news research and consulting firm that helps businesses of all sizes kind of choose LMS solutions non-related to their employees, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. In 2017, there's almost 700 different learning technology platforms, and they all do somewhat the same thing and a lot of different things. And so what our firm does is that we work with organizations really to help them understand what they need, what their requirements are, and then point them in the right direction in the marketplace so that they're evaluating vendors that are specialists in what they're trying to achieve.
So what would be a simple, easy to digest example of that? So somebody listening may be like, what are these guys talking about? Like, give me an example, I guess a simple example of how that might work.
Well, a lot of the large organizations, software organizations, for example, like Dell or HP or other high-tech organizations, they sell their products and services through a third-party channel, partner and channel network. And those partner and channel employees they're not employees of the actual software companies, so they need to train these people and certify them on Dell products and services so that they can go out and resell across the world, for example. And so an organization like that would come to us and they say, this is our challenge. We want to train and certify our channel partners so that we can sell more and win in the marketplace. You know, what type of technology company should we be talking to that can help us do that and have experience in doing exactly that for similar companies? So that'd be a typical use case that I see, every day.
Well, that's a great explanation, and it's almost like you have some idea what you're talking about. So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
No, that really does help out. So, you started the company in 2014. Why don't you kind of tell us how all that started?
Well, what happened, maybe I'll take a step back before that. About 20 years, I got a master's degree 20 years ago in instructional technology, which is same thing I'm doing right now, which is using technology to help people learn. And but I got into right from the very beginning. When I started coming out of college, I was in organizations that were creating content, but instead of creating e-learning or what they call it computer-based training content for employees, I got into a company that was helping people train their channel partners and their customers, very much similar to that example I just gave you. And what I learned in that process very early on in my career is that organizations were willing to pay a lot more for learning content when it was tied to revenue and tied to making profit versus just employee training, which is usually around cost reduction and automation. And so it was a lesson that I learned early on in my career. And so as I progressed, I fell into learning management systems sales, enterprise sales. And as an instructional designer, instructional technologist, I did pretty good at it. And I did it for 13 years. And all 13 years that I was selling for two different companies and eventually led global sales and marketing for one of them, instead of selling learning management systems for employees, I always tried to find those channel and partner and customer opportunities where I could tie it to revenue. And that was my particular specialty. And in all that time of being in the industry, there was no analysts, there's no researchers that were talking about this segment of the marketplace. But I knew from experience that it was very real and very profitable. And so hung up my sales shoes and co-founded Talented Learning to really be that place to go. So we started researching the learning technology market specific to all those type of organizations that are trying to use it for their non-employees. And we started writing about it, doing product reviews, writing serious blog posts. Now have almost 100 blog posts, 50 original webinars, and we built a nice global following of thousands of people. And all of that is really to help people that are involved in learning technology initiatives to understand what's out there, how they can do it better, what are the best vendors, and really who can they partner with to help achieve their goals. And that's what we were founded to do, and that's what we do every day.
That's very, very cool. I mean, your site is awesome. I mean, it took me a little while to kind of wrap my mind around what you did, but as far as just the layout and the content is so rich, just an awesome website you've got with great resources everywhere. So very nice job on that.
Thanks.
So when you were in your previous roles, did you ever have that feeling like, hey, maybe I want to do this for myself someday, or was it not really on your radar?
Yeah, so during those 13 years, what would happen is that organizations themselves would reach out to the vendors and say, hey, we're buying a learning management system, or we want to. And, you would, work with the companies directly to try to sell or work through a request for proposal process to sell them a learning management solution. But every now and then, and again, there was a consultant that was in between. There was somebody that always worked with the buyer and acted as the intermediary with the vendor community and myself. And every time I ran into one of those buyers across those 13 years, I thought, I could do a great job as that intermediary. And eventually I took the leap, and that's exactly what I've become is that intermediary to help organizations buy better. And as a result, help organizations sell better too, through the reverse coaching that I get to provide.
Now, you just piqued my interest a great deal. What is reverse coaching?
So after spending 13 years selling, now that I'm on the buying side and I help organizations buy, I get to see as a sales guy, what you don't get to see is other sales people very often in action. You don't see your competitors, and you don't see your peers even in the same company, because it just doesn't work that way. Everybody's kind of out on their own unless you're in sales management. And so there's not a lot of chances to stack rank yourself, to understand how good you are as a salesperson and what you're strong at and what you're weak at. And though I focused for all my years on learning that about myself, there still is a big blind spot, because you don't get to really see in action against people selling LMSs, for example. So now on the buyer side, What I do is I help buyers buy by identifying the short list of qualified vendors. And so I'll get to see 3 or 4 highly qualified vendors for a particular opportunity, and I get to watch them sell from A to Z. And it's fascinating for me since I wore those shoes and carried that bag. And what I do is I reverse coach. I help them sell better by, after the fact, debriefing with them, pointing out, their strengths or weaknesses, both on an individual and a corporate level. And not with the intention so much of making money or consulting sales, but really for the intention of allowing them to find better customers in the future. Because where learning technology really works is when the buyers and the sellers are both happy with the arrangement and they're both marching in the same direction. So by the reverse coaching, I'm helping them sell better and giving them feedback that they just don't get normally or ever, I think, in a qualitative or quantitative manner.
Well, it sounds like that probably goes a long way in building strong relationships too. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I bring these vendor partners in on an opportunity, right now it is more than just being that consultant that's standing in the way, because it's because I'm building those relationships. I have my name and our company's name and stamp on that, and that allows us, I think, to provide better information flow both ways, both to the buyer and to the seller, so that everybody is more in the light. And the reason that you want to do that is, these solutions can be really expensive. It's easy to spend $1 million to invest $1 million in learning technology over 1 year, or certainly over a multiple year standpoint. And so, to not waste money is pretty critical. And to do it right is in the best interest of a lot of people.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. So when you talked about, I'm kind of going back to one area because I'm just really curious. So you talked about the time spent in the field selling when you were still an employee. What happened in 2014 where you either finally saw your opportunity or you finally said, enough is enough. Like, I got to do this. I got to do my own thing. Do you remember kind of that moment or that point that you switched over there?
Oh, I agonized over it. I just absolutely agonized over it, because the good thing about being pretty decent at selling enterprise solutions that are 7 figures is that you make a pretty decent fiscal living. And so, to hang that up and to give away that W-2 and start your own thing in something that's you have no experience in and you have to build it up from scratch, is a scary proposition. And so I thought about it for a lot of years. I'd like to say I was real smart and I, made the decision and had my business plan, and, all that took 60 days, but it didn't. It probably took 6 years as I thought about it and I evolved it and tossed it around and prepared and saved and, did what I could on the side and weekends to prepare for the very painful hit of giving up a W-2 and starting your own organization and living off your savings. And so that process, when it did happen, I knew I had to do it, or I'd just basically be a sales guy for the rest of my life, and I just didn't want to do that.
Absolutely. Do you have any regrets now, looking back?
Oh my gosh, no! I wish I would have done it earlier.
That's awesome.
I was a chicken. I probably couldn't have done it 20 years earlier, or even 15 years earlier, but I probably could have done it 10 years earlier. But I would never go back. The last 3 years have been great. I mean, I was stretching my wings. We self-funded the organization, so there's no outside influence.
Nice.
I don't do it. I just don't do a thing I don't want to do, and I don't have to be beholden or influenced to anybody. And it's really been the greatest 3 years of my life from a professional standpoint.
Well, I love what you just said, because you captured the fear that so many people listening are experiencing. I can't tell you in a week or in a month how many people I talk to have great ideas, but it's that fear. What if I fail? What will people think? That's the biggest thing. People are obsessed about what other people are going to think. I just can't stand that. Like, I don't give a rip what people think about me, because it doesn't have any bearing on your situation. But, people still have that fear. That fear. It's powerful. And here you are. You've gone through it. You've triumphed. And now you're looking back like, man, I should have done this 10 years sooner. So I hope somebody listening is like, yeah, that's so me. I need to do something. So beautiful.
The fear was palatable, without a doubt. I mean, because the only way this could work for my business is that I needed to help people buy learning management systems, but where do you find them? How do you find people that are buying for 13 years? I tried to figure out where those people were earlier than the next guy, and so that was always the struggle of how could I find these prospects before they found the learning management systems themselves? And so how could I get myself in between there? And the only way that I could figure out how to do it without spending a fortune was by writing, was by creating a blog and creating inbound paths that talked about buying and selling learning management systems in a way that people would recognize, hopefully, that I knew what I was talking about and be able to engage. There's only one problem, is that I never written anything publicly other than proposals in my whole life. So on top of the fear of giving up my W-2, I had a very public fear of really looking silly in front of a whole lot of people trying to write. And that weighed on me a lot too. However, I got over it, and now writing is now absolutely one of my joys. I just love when I could carve the time to be able to do it now on a more frequent basis.
Absolutely. And I was we got a touch into something I was going to talk about in a second, and that's your content strategy. But before I jump into that, any major challenges that you faced when you got the business started? Like, say in the first 12 months, what would you say some of your biggest challenges were just getting things going, getting traction?
There's a lot of challenges getting going. If I had it all to do over again, I would have done more preparation. I think more blocking and tackling on somebody's W-2, while still getting paid somewhere else. But I think what surprised me was all the things I didn't know around accounting, around just invoicing and collecting and, setting up websites and WordPress and, hooking that to databases and learning what marketing automation tools are and why you want to build an email list and what SEO is. And, I didn't know any of that stuff or knew it at a pretty minor level. And so in addition to trying to, earn money as fast as I could and build traffic, I had to spend a significant amount of time learning things that I didn't know. And, but just like riding a bike, once you learn them, they're like anything in life, once you know it, it's not tough. But I was surprised about all the things that I was supposed to know that I didn't.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really fair. And one of the things that's gotten me, my story is kind of interesting. I've done what you did and failed, quit an employer and tried to go full time on my own and failed and burned up a bunch of money and time, and then kind of limped along and rebuilding and going to do it again at some point. So I say that very publicly with complete confidence and unwavering conviction, which I'm sure you understand. But yeah, a lot of people just, they don't, like you said, like WordPress.org. Like when I first learned what that was, I'm like, what in the world is open source? What is an open source website? I don't know what that means. There's a lot of little things that you never think about, like you say. And going along with that, there's a lot of little costs you never even knew existed. Like, good Lord, everything costs so much. So really well said. So let's talk about your content strategy for a moment. Some people listening may not have a clue what that is, but for what I gathered, it looks like your goal and what you're doing well is being an authoritative resource in your industry. Kind of share with us a little bit what that means and how that works.
So what happened during the 13 years as you become a professional salesperson and you're selling higher and higher ticket items, what you find pretty quickly in your career is that you're more experienced than most of the people you're more experienced selling than most of the people are at buying. And, maybe not in the first 5 or 10 years of your career, but it happens somewhere in that time period where you become more experienced in selling. And as that transition occurs, what becomes painfully glaring obvious is the mistakes that buyers make. And the mistakes they make in research, the mistakes they make in just their assumptions on what they need or what they think they need, or how to approach it, or how they should negotiate, or how they should prepare, or what vendors they should be talking to, or how a proposal process should work, or what questions they should ask. All of that. There's no Bible or there's no document that you can go to that teaches you all that stuff. And so you either learn it by just being naturally good at it or through experience. But everybody else is kind of very, very inexperienced and unsure of themselves when buying $1 million system where your career could be. tied to it. And so I got to, throughout my career, just paying attention to all the different types of buyers and all the different types of mistakes that they made. And sometimes those mistakes would be in my benefit, and a lot of times, they wouldn't be in my benefit as a salesperson. But from a content standpoint, I thought, if I could just write about all those mistakes that people make and try to be a place where people could go to make smart, practical decisions, to not buy sizzle, to not get caught up in the marketing fluff, but think about things strategically and from a measurable business value. If I could identify all those different areas and start writing about them, inevitably I would find people that were Googling that exact problem that would get caught into my SEO net or my content net. And once I got caught in there and they read one of those articles, since they're all linked to 10 or more articles, each one, hopefully they would start bouncing in my network of content and find lots of valuable information that would help them make the right choice. And so from my content strategy standpoint, my goal was to provide as much free resources as I possibly could about all this stuff, because I knew at the end, or at least I theorized, at the end people would say, if I get all this stuff for free, what do I get if I actually pay this guy?
Absolutely.
And that was my strategy. And so, now I don't help people buy, when people have a big problem, they come to me and I help them figure it out. And that's all from the content. That's all the content strategy working.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of that, I just saw this right before we jumped on the call today. How have webinars worked for you? It's something I've thought about getting into myself this year, and I see you've got quite a bit going on there. How's that played out?
I like it a lot. So I have two main content venues or medium, and it's the blog posts and it's the webinars. And a webinar is essentially what we're doing now, except you fly without a net live. And so, we're talking live now, but we don't have an audience of 1 or 500 people that are tuning in at the same time. So webinars kind of are similar to this, but they carry some risk of downside, from a technical standpoint if things go wrong. But the upside is that they can be interactive. You can get questions from the audience. They can help turn the presentation or point clarification on their presentation in ways that weren't anticipated. And you get a lot of interaction with questions and back and forth. And why all that is important is, the webinars, just like the blog posts, are all on topics that'll hopefully be useful to people that are thinking about or buying or have just purchased learning technology. And so it throws a nice net to find people that are responding to the abstract or the marketing of that particular webinar, and then being able to try to share some best practices. And lots of times they take that knowledge and they go and they hopefully make good decisions. And lots of times they come reach back out to Talented Learning and ask for help in one way or another to in their process. So I find it invaluable. Last year I've done about 50 altogether. In 2017 we're doing one every 3 weeks. We just keep it every 3 weeks, and then we market it for 3 weeks, and we're ready to go right on the next one. And it's kind of tied right into our blog content, so the two go together. So if we catch people's attention with a relevant topic in the blog, they can sign up for the deeper level conversation in the webinar. So for me, it's really been a nice strategy. We've been recording those webinars, and then we use those as put those behind forums over time. So it's still free content, but you have to identify yourself to access the back library of these recordings.
Sure. Does a webinar give you a good opportunity to capture email addresses as well to build that list?
Yeah, exactly. So, just in the registration process, you're getting who they are, or, you can control how much or how little you want to collect in the registration process. I try to keep it real light, not to scare people off. But
yeah,
in the end of the day, it is building that list because, over time, not everybody is in the market, for a learning management system or passing through that phase in their career as they go do something else. And so, continually building and grooming that list is really paramount, I think, to finding people when they are ready in that particular cycle.
Yeah, email still remains the best way to get in touch with people, and it's definitely going to be your most engaged followers. So very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too.
Well, let me ask you this. You've been there before. What 3 tips, kind of actionable takeaways, would you give anybody that's considering a startup or in a startup that's going to try to use some kind of content to grow their audience, whether it's podcasts like this one, whether it's webinars, whether it's YouTube, or whatever the case may be, even blogging? What would you say to them?
I think that's a good question.
Thank you, sir.
You must be a professional. I think probably the most important thing that you can do is that you can't fake it. You got to find something that you're really interested in. Writing is hard. I'm sure Hemingway, he's blasting things out all the time and thought it was great. And there's probably bloggers that can do that. But for me, writing's been hard. It's always a laborious process to try to organize my thoughts, try to figure out what I want to talk about, organize it and do it in an engaging way is something that is really a labor of love. And so if you're going to start any entrepreneurial business that's centered around content, that better be something that not only do you know deeply, but that you're passionate about. Otherwise, you'll hit the wall almost immediately, because even with a topic that I am passionate about, I feel like I hit that content wall a lot of times where I'm struggling for the next new topic until a new idea or vein of topics hits me. So I think that's number one is just do something that you're passionate about. It may seem trite, but if it's going to be content, you don't have any other choice. I think the other thing is to ride on somebody's W-2 as long as you can and invest that time wisely. I'm not saying you take your 40 hours that you're supposed to be working for them and work on your business plan, but you work your 40 hours for your company, and then you work your nights and your weekends where, you don't have to work without a net. You're still getting paid during that time. So, your business plan, getting the basics of your WordPress site, getting fresh books or whatever your accounting system is, tying these different software platforms to the beginnings of your writing. All that should happen while you're still employed, and finding that in your spare time, getting up early or going to bed late. And that way you can hit the ground running without so much lag time. Because it is, I guess the third tip is to really prepare for that lag time. No matter what your job is, whether you're making 40 grand or whether you're making 240 grand, when you give up your salary, you feel that because you're not only giving up the 40 grand that's coming in, but you're also dipping into your savings that it took so long to build up in the first place to compensate for that 40 grand. So even if you pull your belt really tight, you feel that. Everybody feels that. And so to plan for that and to, ensure that you have a cushion of not only fiscal cushion, but a content cushion. So, if you took a year to have that fiscal and content cushion so that you can roll things out over time and start generating that revenue sooner. And so I always tell people about my rule of 10, and it's not, it's nothing fantastic, but I'm like a lifelong learner. I'm not even kidding you. I probably have 100 different ongoing hobbies that I've had, some for 5 years, some for 40 years that I've been working on. And I just love doing all my hobbies and learning about all different things. And I learned early on, just as a kid, that the power of 10. And that is, if you just take 10 minutes a day and you do that 6 times a week, you're basically looking at 50 hours in a given year. So just a measly 10 minutes a day if you practice writing, or if you practice guitar, or if you jogged, or if you did push-up. 10 minutes, that's 50 hours. That's 10 minutes a day, 6 days a week is 1 hour, 52 hours in a given year. When was the last time you spent 52 hours doing anything to try to get better? So if you spent the next year just 10 minutes a day and invested 52 hours on your business plan and all those things I talked about, you'd be ready to have that fiscal and content cushion ready to rock and roll as you pull the lever from a W-2 to an entrepreneur.
I think that's great advice. Absolutely great. Very well said. The thing you said about the passion hit home pretty hard with me. The reason I failed horribly last year with my leap was because I was running after an income opportunity that I had no real passion with. So I know that pain all too well, and I'm thankful for that pain and that struggle, because out of that you get perspective and you can write and talk about it the rest of your life. and help other people. But no, it's just, you just hit the nail on the head 3 times in a row. So very, very well said, man. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
So what's next for you in Talented Learning? Where do you guys go from here? You know, we're in January of 2017, and I'm sure you've got goals and things this year. So what does it look like?
Yeah, it's fun. It's rapidly evolving as each year brings on new and broader opportunities. So our number one goal was to fill up our consulting schedules, to get enough business that we could keep ourselves busy with helping organizations with serious learning management needs. We accomplished that. So we're completely maxed out. We refer a lot of business to other places because it's hard to staff up from a scalability standpoint because, people that, have, a decade of sales experience and are entrepreneurs and willing to give up their W-2 aren't falling off trees. And so, we found pretty quickly that, we're not going to scale up with a whole lot of people like ourselves, so that we had to scale up from a content perspective and to try to replicate the personal help with content. And so in light of that, what we've been doing is working on online courses here. So practicing what we preach, eating our own dog food, so to speak, of now taking all of our intellectual capital and putting it into courseware to help people buy and sell learning management systems. So things like feature guides and how-to guides, and so we've been pulling that together. Last year we had our first publication called the LMS Almanac, where we pulled together our first 2 years of research into one consolidated document, and now we've taken that to the next level and made that interactive and content-based. So 2017, our main goal is really now to build our paid content business as a secondary stream of income for our organization.
Very nice. Passive income's great, isn't it?
I've read about
it. You'll find out soon enough, I'm sure.
I'll let you know next year.
All right, sounds great. Well, if anybody listening really loves what you said and would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can find me on Twitter at John Leh, JOHNLEH is probably the easiest, or John Leh at talentedlearning.com is my email. Feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or any social media. We got a pretty strong presence.
Okay. And I'll tell you guys, he's very responsive and easy to get a hold of, so that's always a big plus too. Well, John, I certainly appreciate your time today. I've had a great time with it. I hope it's been enjoyable for you as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me in. It's fun to talk about the starting the business and just that whole process. And anybody out there that is in that and wants to bounce off any ideas, I'm happy to help.
All right. We appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir. Have a great day.
You too. If you need anything from us ever, obviously you're part of the family now, so no problem at all. Well, if you guys want to check out the show notes from this episode, just go to intentionallyinspirational.com/episode 53. We'll have our show notes there. We'll have links to John's Twitter account, his website, and his email as well. Nice and convenient for you. And something new I want to throw at you. So just for the first episode of the show, I paid somebody to transcribe it for me into words. I wonder if there's any of you out there that find that the transcriptions valuable. I'd love to get some feedback on that, because I've got a lot of episodes, and I don't want to spend the time or the money to do it if I don't think people are going to pay attention to it. So I'm kind of curious. I did one episode. I'd love for somebody to take a peek at that. Right there on our podcast page, right under the show notes, there's a link for that transcription. I'm just curious if people like consuming this kind of content that way. So if somebody would reach out to me, let me know. That'd be awesome.